I'd like to call this meeting of the Public Services Committee Tuesday, September 10th, 2013 at 4:53 to order. The first item on the agenda, I guess, will be a review and approval of minutes dated July 9th. Are we going to be able to do that? We're just only two people here. I don't think we have a quorum, so we
don't have a quorum, but we can just file them, can't we? We don't have to vote.
just file them.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next on the agenda will be the taxi cab ordinance review. We'll have Jim David give us an overview on that, and then we will ask for some public comment. Jim?
Good evening, Jim David, City Council staff. We'll start here with just a little bit of an introduction, and then we'll lead into the ordinance itself. Oops. Chapter 124 is the ordinance that regulates vehicle for hire, which not only includes taxi cabs, it includes buses, limousines, and other vehicles for hire. Within this ordinance, specifically the area that deals with taxi cabs, most of that language actually dates back to 1982. We had a rate increase in 2000, and then we had a rate surcharge added in 2002 in response to the rise in fuel prices at the time. We had additional rate increases in 2007 and 2009. Earlier this year, the Public Services Committee reviewed the ordinance, but since that time, at the direction of this committee, staff from Council, City Attorney's Office, Police, and Planning began looking at the ordinance in its entirety and looking for possible changes, possible improvements in areas that could have better clarity and the direction that the city wants to go when it comes to taxis. We also added to the list, if you remember, we looked at Lincoln, Des Moines, and St. Paul, but we added in other cities that we looked at: Fargo, Sioux City, Cedar Rapids, and Rochester, Minnesota. This proposed ordinance, or the way that staff has drafted it, includes no increase in taxi cab rates or no changes. The last time, if you remember, we reviewed the increase in taxi cab companies and owners. This is an updated tally of the total number of taxi cab companies and owners in the City of Sioux Falls. You'll see that it increased from our last conversation from 18 to 23, and the number of owners has increased from 16 to 20. Okay, now we'll do the actual ordinance itself. As Councilor Anderson had said earlier, this process really starts at the committee level. The committee will go through, look at this ordinance, recommend any changes. Staff will come back with those changes, and then the committee will finally, if it chooses to, approve it. It goes to the City Council, have a first reading, and then those who are interested will have another opportunity for public input at a second reading. Because there's no quorum here today, we expect that this ordinance will be discussed at next month's Public Services Committee meeting. If we start here and we actually go down to the definitions, it's going to be the next page, Dave. For the first time, we actually add, or we define, a mechanic, and we used, we call it a certified mechanic, and we use ASE certification. This is considered the national standard for mechanics. There's other options. Since that time, we heard comments from some that they would like that definition expanded, so we may look at what the U.S. DOT uses for its definition of a qualified mechanic. Also, passenger service vehicle. This is an area that never really fell within a taxi cab or a limousine. It was kind of off in its own separate category, but it was never truly defined. And it's a motor vehicle without decals or markings, and that carries passengers for a fixed fee and by appointment. If we go to the next page in the frequency of inspections, in the current ordinance right now, it actually requires that inspections be done every 3 months or 3,000 miles, whichever occurs first. And according to the ordinance, the owner is required to keep a record of that inspection. What we did in these changes is that we actually added that inspection should be done by a certified mechanic, somebody with some expertise within vehicles, looking at the brakes, looking at the transmission, looking at the other areas, the other mechanics of a vehicle. And we also recognize a vehicle inspection form, and that is developed by the licensing specialist office, and it basically can be done administratively. We made the decision not to include the specifics of that inspection form within ordinance in order to allow a certain amount of flexibility. Some of the comments that we received regarding this section in particular was the potential for added costs onto the taxi cab company. In talking with some of the mechanics in town, this expense could be $40 to $50. So there's an opportunity for maybe changing this to have an annual inspection by a certified mechanic that is far more detailed, and then the inspection that's done every 3,000 miles or 3 months could be done by the company itself, and that may be less intrusive, but could actually document some of the review that they do. Just kind of as a background of what other cities do, Cedar Rapids, Rochester, and Sioux City do annual inspections, and they actually do have that hired out. And Fargo does 90-day, every 90 days, an inspection by a qualified mechanic. Continuing on to the section dealing with taxi cab rates, we just had a simple fix there where we crossed out 5 and have 7 instead, just because taxi cabs are 7 passengers and the fare only addresses 5 passengers or less. So if you have 7 passengers, there's a possibility you won't have to actually be bound to that current rate. Within the next one, we have the fuel surcharge, and I looked back and I asked around the kind of the history on this section. And as I said earlier, this was developed in 2002 when we only had 2 taxi cab companies in the city of Sioux Falls. If you look at its current language, if any taxi cab company wants to abide by this fuel surcharge, they have to send documents justifying the need for the increase. Staff felt that the best way to handle this was to simplify the process, have 2 dates out of the year that the licensing specialist would send those increases out, and so at least everybody's on the same playing field. The next sections were just basically consumer protection, posted schedule. We add that the rates should be posted on the taxi cab. A taxi cab company can have a maximum that they can charge, but there is no minimum. We also have a section that provides the opportunity for the customer or the passenger to have a receipt for payment of rates that include taxes, the total amount that was paid. Overcharging is prohibited, and we added in a section here for deceit as to direct route. We had an example discussed at the staff level of a taxi cab company that picked up somebody on the northwest side of Sioux Falls and had to drive them to the mall, but took a route going I-90 east down 229 up Louise to the mall. They were charged, I think it was somewhere around $50. So then they kind of budgeted themselves. They weren't really familiar with Sioux Falls, and they knew that all their shopping they had to do, they had to make sure they had that $50 for the taxi ride back. They called the taxi cab company and took them directly, of course, up I-29 to their destination right off 60th Street North, and they only were charged $20-some-odd, and that's when the story came about with that going all the way around the city. So we added in that deceit as to direct route. The other area is taximeters. Currently, a taxi is required to have a taximeter. In fact, that's what distinguishes a taxi cab from other vehicles. What we actually added in here was that the taxi meter should be inspected by the city. In fact, we prohibit a taxi cab from actually operating without a taximeter that is installed. Looking at some of the other cities, we find that Fargo, Cedar Rapids, Rochester, Lincoln, St. Paul, Des Moines all require some sort of inspection of their taximeter. Since that time, we've asked various departments, looked at the opportunity for them to do the inspection, And let me back up here. The inspection in Cedar Rapids, for example, requires somebody from the police department to hop in the taxi cab and ride a certain a mile distance and make sure that the taximeter is calibrated correctly. One of the ideas that we've tossed around the last 24 hours, meeting with Councilor Anderson and Galen Huber over at Fleet, was why not have a bid go out to the mechanics across Sioux Falls, checking to see if they would be interested in doing this for a set fee, and we would try to get the most reasonable fee for this, but actually hand it or have the private sector handle the certification of those taximeters. Going on, continuing on through the taximeter, it's just some simple changes. Let me back up here. We actually also built in some flexibility within this requirement with the taximeters that it wouldn't be effective till February 1st, 2014. In 124.007, the use of taximeter, we simply added in the necessity to throw the taximeter flag into the recording position at the beginning of the trip and non-recording position at the end of the trip. We also added in 124.008, passenger must pay rate prescribed. This simply recognizes that cabs do not always charge the maximum. So we just simply added that section because as it now reads, every taxi cab company would have to pay the amount that's currently in ordinance. Continuing on to the wheelchair and stretcher transport rates, this actually had nothing to do with taxi cabs but came about in our review of the ordinance. Right now that these rates are supposed to be posted with the planning department and the city clerk's office. We changed that and actually just had this be posted by the licensing specialist office once a year. It just simplifies and in 124.011, the Airway and Taxi and Limo Services, Inc., this is simply outdated, so we struck that from the ordinance. 124.029, issuance. We just basically had, again, this is language on that taximeter, and it needs to be sealed at all points before a license can be issued. Revocation, we added standard revocation language found in other places in ordinance with the appeal language that's found in other places in ordinance. Application to increase the number of vehicles for hire. We struck this language, as it reads, it authorizes the licensing specialist to limit the number of taxi cab companies in the city of Sioux Falls. We felt that this was actually a decision of the city council. In the other area of insurance required, we didn't make any changes to insurance. We might have to strengthen the language to make sure that the taxi cabs actually have this type of coverage. But we know that at next month's meeting, we will hear from somebody, an attorney in town, that will discuss problems that he had faced with the current auto liability being at $500,000. His client's expenses actually exceeded $500,000, and there's nothing no remedy that could occur. The general liability section here at $1 million, that only applies if an accident happens at that place of business, the person slips on a sidewalk, things of that nature. Investigation, examination of applicant. This was actually developed by Assistant Police Chief Patty Lyon and Keith Allenstein in the City Attorney's Office. It just clears up some of the ambiguous language that currently existed, took the subjectivity out of it, and actually listed what will be used in the review of the licensee. Display of the license in 124.063. We just basically say that it should be conspicuously displayed. Right now, we're actually not taking photographs of the licensee, but we're looking for ways, or the police department's looking for ways to implement that current language and also making sure that it's conspicuously displayed in the taxi cab. In the area of revocation, this has to do with revocation of a driver license. Right now, it has the city council as the arbiter of somebody. They can appeal it to the city council. Or let me back up. It's actually revoked by the city council. We didn't think that made any sense, having the city council in that situation, so we struck that and had the police chief or his designee, and then added in the basic appeal language found in city ordinance. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Do you have questions?
Start. Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you. I do have a few questions, Jim, if you don't mind. I like the idea of the certified mechanic expanding that. That's a good idea.
Yep.
And remembering that I'm just reviewing this with you guys now. My first question is under 124.003, frequency of inspection. And I don't know if I'm not reading it right. It says the city may inspect, and this is not in a part that's being changed, the city may inspect the vehicles at any time to determine compliance. Will we inspect them?
I think from what that does is it provides the flexibility after the inspection for them to go at any time and inspect. Maybe there's a complaint to the licensing specialist office that there's an allegation made against specific taxi cab. This provides that opportunity for them to go in and inspect that vehicle. I believe, and I can talk with the city attorney's office, see if we need to strengthen that language if it creates that flexibility.
Well, yeah, I guess I understand that, especially if we're requiring more inspections by certified mechanics and all of that, that may help my concern with that. If I might, Mr. Chair, one other. Under the taximeter 124.006, top of that next page, first of all, if they don't have a taximeter, how do they charge fares? Is it just oh, I know it's kind of a couple miles from this point to that point, so I'm going to charge you $6 or whatever? I mean, is that how, if you don't have a taximeter actually doing it, how do you charge?
Well, you know, in the definition back, we talked about the passenger service vehicle, that they just have a flat fee no
Right.
matter what.
Okay.
With the taximeter, we felt it was necessary to make sure that it's sealed, that it's not manipulated. I think most taxi companies, as far as I know, do have some sort of a taximeter. We also did want to strengthen that language to make sure it said mechanically, because there is, as you know, with smartphones, there's always an app for everything, and there is an app probably for this, and so you're going to have them using their cell phones, using GPS, which is fine, but there's no way for the city to verify that it's correct. So.
Right. Exactly. And I did do some traveling and found that GPS isn't always right this last
Exactly.
week. And then just one other thing. One of the things that I heard in testimony previously when we first started this conversation was that getting the taximeter installed properly, some folks were having to go to Minneapolis, that it wasn't necessarily something you could have done in town. Is that still true, or do we think with the number of businesses we have now that there is someone out there that could do this?
You know, that's a good question. Many of the companies actually order them off the internet. In fact, I heard that quite frequently. But with the installation, from what I understand, it's typically hooked up to the transmission or to the axle. But I'm not exactly sure. Some may go out of town to have this done. But
Okay. That'd be something that if we had public input either today or next month, that if someone could talk to us about that installation process, that would be really helpful. So.
And to add to that, that is something we are looking at, and with the technology and that's out there also, that's something that we've discussed at length, but wanted to also get the input from the cab companies. There might be some out there at this time actually using GPS to do their rates, and actually by ordinance right now a taxi cab should have a taxi meter in it. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things that we felt need to be discussed.
Well, I feel like too, this is one of those things where technology is probably moving faster than what my little brain can understand. I mean, things change so fast that maybe taximeter isn't even really it. Maybe it's something more than that, or maybe we need to broaden that to include, technology to be defined later kind of thing. I mean, there may be some stuff going here that we don't know about. So I really would like to hear input on those kinds of things. So.
And then to reply to one of your earlier questions about the annual inspection, the annual inspection is where we would really like to have a certified mechanic verify that and provide that paperwork for the company. Those inspections in between there are more of just checking company records, things that we have not done. This ordinance, once again, goes back to 1982, but the one thing that really stood out as we looked into this is that there is no department or individual who actually goes out and verifies those records and can do on-site inspections. And that's something that I hope to change here with this ordinance, and speaking to the mayor and the council about maybe giving the licensing department a part-time position to be able to have a person to go out and, do those physical inspections.
No, I think it's great. If I could just comment, it's amazing the difference between when we started this conversation and where you've brought it now as a committee. This is really great. I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this so far.
I definitely want to thank Jim David, our police department, our legal team. They've done a lot of work over the last few months really taking a look at this. And then after we had some other counselors take a look at it and made some suggestions, we've tried to follow up on that. We hope that this is an opening of a discussion to modernize this ordinance and make sure that all of our cab companies are operating in a safe manner.
Good.
Thank you, Jim. At this time, I would like to open it up to public testimony and public comment. I'd like you, if possible, to keep it to, like about 5 or 10 minutes so that we can allow everyone that would like to speak to be able to speak. So, please say your name.
Tom Werner, First Choice Taxi. First off, I want to say that I do appreciate all the effort that is being made to this. A lot of the issues that we brought up in January have been addressed. In the passenger service vehicle definition, there are a few of us that the language that says without business decals really restricts the opportunity for that private car growth in Sioux Falls. There are some private car companies and ones that are looking to be developed that would like to have their name on their car. It may not have to be very big, but at least something. The limousine companies, I know Mr. Olson with Stellar is here today. All of his limousines say Stellar Limousine right on them, and they're easily defined and recognizable. I would encourage that language to be looked at a little more closely. In regards to the frequencies of inspections, I've talked with my mechanic extensively. I do pay for my inspections. The cost is minimal, but it can be cumbersome as a company is growing. I know representatives from Yellow Cab are here, and if they're paying a certified mechanic for 22 vehicles, that would be very expensive, especially if it's every 3,000 miles. I know we put on about 1,000 miles a week, so that means that these inspections are having to be done every 3 weeks. My mechanic personally that operates a big full-time shop doesn't have time to do that. I would encourage a 90 days or a 6-month time frame on inspections that have to be done by a certified mechanic. As was mentioned earlier, if we could do the 3,000 miles inspections at a company level, I think that most of us are already doing that anyways. We're checking our tire pressures, we're checking our oil every day that we go out anyways.
On that, Tim, I'd like to respond to you on that real quick. On that, I think that's exactly the route we're looking at, is that the yearly inspections would be done by a certified mechanic, and then those other inspections would be done internally, and then we would look at your records. So I think we're on the same track there too.
Yeah, I would just encourage a little bit less than 1 year though, because we like to run very nice vehicles, and 1 to 2 years of a vehicle that we run on the road is the lifespan of that vehicle. So if we're only taking a look at it every once a year, you've already spent half the vehicle of that life before it's being looked at again. On the posted schedule, this list that we would have to post inside the vehicle compartment in 3 different places, a big sticker in the front compartment, left and rear doors. I think that would really make the inside of our cabs look gaudy, because you'd have stickers everywhere. Minneapolis, New York City, all the bigger cities, they just have it right outside their rear door. If we could move that from the inside of the vehicle to the outside of the vehicle, then that way when people are walking up to us at the airport or something like that, if they want to see our rates, it can be right on the outside of the car, because that's what people are used to. In regards to the receipts, right now we use a program called Square to run our credit cards and things like that. Square has the capability of either texting or emailing a professional looking receipt. It does not allow for a lot of, to where you can edit it. So a lot of the information that's being asked here, like the vehicle license number, driver signature, things like that, people are looking for that electronic access. They like the emailed receipts, you know, things like that. The information that is being asked here to be provided in those receipts is way more than what those professional service receipts are capable of doing. In regards to the taxi meter, there are two companies in this town that have experimented with the difference between a GPS meter and a mechanical meter, myself included, and Rico's Taxi, which Rico is here today representing his company also. We've worked together on this. We've worked separately on this. We've done a lot of testing with this. That is a national debate going on right now, the difference between a mechanical meter and a GPS. There are ways to lock the GPS meters. There are ways to guarantee that they can't be messed with. A mechanical meter, even though it can be locked at the post by a certified mechanic, there are other ways to manipulate that. The air pressure in your tires, the speedometer gear, a change of tires. There's a lot of different ways that can be manipulated. I've worked for other companies in this town, and that has been done over the years. The other thing is a GPS meter is 100% accurate every single time. If a customer calls in and says, how much is it from the airport to the Empire Mall? You go on Google Maps, you can get that distance, you can times it by your rate, you can give an exact price. When they jump in your cab, you drive the exact same route, it will be that exact price. There is no guarantee with that with a mechanical meter. A mechanical meter, you could take one of the bigger companies, doesn't matter which one, Yellow Cab, us, whatever. If you're using a mechanical meter, if you run 5 cabs, there's a chance that most of those cabs will vary within one click. And on the application to increase number of vehicles, it was stated earlier that this would also be applied to increasing the number of companies. But I guess I'm confused because how I read this, it doesn't seem to have that language built into that. It just says by increasing the number of vehicles. If that is going to be applied to increasing the number of vehicles as applied to increase the number of companies, I would suggest some sort of medallion system like the bigger cities use. That way, the companies that are already grandfathered in, that are already here, would be able to benefit financially from that. And it's not just from a selfish standpoint, but all of this, you know, there's many companies represented here. We're the ones putting in the blood, sweat, and tears out on the street every single day, and we should be rewarded for that. Yeah. The only other question that I had was on the existing drivers. If some of these standards, if a driver that was already approved based on discretionary methods that have been used in the past, if an existing driver falls under one of these categories, you know, say they had a suspended license or something like that, does that mean that February 1st or whenever these ordinances go into effect, would that mean that that driver's out of a job? Or are they going to be grandfathered in? You know, some of these only have a 1-year expiration date on that. Well, if they got a license this year, they're only a couple months away from that. You know, how is that going to be addressed? And that's all that I had.
Thank you very much, and I hope by the next meeting we'll have solid answers for you on every one of those questions.
Yep. And myself and Rico's Taxi would be able to provide lots of valuable information in the discussion of taximeters, because we are both using electronic means that, even though the meter itself may run off of GPS, we are also using electronic tracking methods. So if you ask, okay, or the police department asks, say, hey, you picked this person up at Wiley's, you dropped them off here, they're saying that you went the wrong way, they're saying they got overcharged, whatever. We're the only companies in town that could print off a GPS report and show you, say, here's a verified report of which way we took and how much they were charged. To where any company, take a Sioux Falls taxi, for example, okay, that's just using a mechanical meter, and they're writing their rides down on a piece of notebook paper. There's no proof of anything.
And that's one of the things, I think, as Councilor Erfenbach also mentioned, is this technology part of it. This ordinance goes back to 1982. We are looking at that technology part of it, and we do have those questions. So I would say there's more than a good chance we will be contacting the companies that are using the electronic means and trying to get more information on that.
And currently we are using both. We have 2 vehicles that run a GPS meter and 5 vehicles that have the mechanical. I've taken it side by side in the same vehicle. The prices have matched up every time. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public testimony?
Well, I'm Rico with Rico's Taxi. I was just going to address the meter too because of the issue that was mainly brought up, that they said somebody drove from a certain and took the wrong route or the longest route. These, and just like Tom had mentioned, are secondary forms of that we use as GPS tracking. I use that for if I have a driver out there, I want to make sure where he's at, if he's working or goofing off. But I also use it for if anybody does question, you can tell exactly from what street they took to where they turned, where they went, and it would do that as well. And also I was going to address with the time off that's being addressed here. Even if you lock the meters, and I heard rumors only because of some of my passengers are saying that some people are running the time and the distance. So if you're running time and distance, every minute it's going to click and every mile it's going to click. So they're being double charged. Or 24 cents every minute they're being charged to drive a certain distance. And that happened to me when I went out one night and I actually rode in a cab, and that's what happened to me. I was charged double what it should have been. And I think a lot of that would be, I don't know how to do the time off. I don't know if we can clarify the time off. The time off is only when the vehicle is not having passengers. If you're waiting for somebody at a store, if somebody wants to run in a store and come off, you can hit the time off. Or if you're sitting in McDonald's parking lot with a van full of people and they're just getting free burgers, it doesn't help us. So we need to charge the time. Also, the other thing I was going to say is, like Tom said, if you needed any verification for any of the stuff that we, for electronics we use, because I've used mine next to a meter, and I'm actually within a couple cents to right on, under. So, their meter's one thing, mine is under. So, that's basically what I was going to address, besides the fact that I was wondering about the inspections too. Because I priced this week, and I don't know, I would like to know the people you talk to, because everybody I talked to that ASE certified said $70. And $70 every 3 months would be quite an expense. So.
And once again, this is just an initial draft, so it's a great time to start this discussion.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else for public testimony?
Joseph Barsh, the Pickett Capital C company. If I may have a suggestion to the committee chair that for maybe next hearing we have an expert on mechanical versus electronic meters, I would love to hear the expertise rather than one-sided company that uses only electronic and wants to push that on the rest of the companies. So an expert in this field would be probably very much welcomed because from my experience I use mechanical meter and I don't see any problem with that. It's a nationally known company here, made in USA. Some people are using the Canadian ones, and it will be very interesting to hear the opinion of somebody who really knows how those meters operate and whether there's any a combination that can be dissuaded from the truth. So that's my only suggestion, sir.
Sir, if you could speak with Jim, who gave the initial presentation, and give him that information, that's something we would like to look up.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to testify?
Hi, I'm Joseph Goodface, Falls Metro Taxi. Like you said about the meters, I mean, I've had numbers of customers coming up and say, they've been ripped off, going from like downtown to say the library bar. One driver will charge them like, say, $15 on the way back. The public charge $22. And it all just depends on the driver and which route they take. As far as the way the meters work, there's about 27 different kinds of meters. Honestly, I've looked it up. Like there's GPS ones like Tom uses, and there's the mechanical ones like I use. And they don't really go off the transmission. I've actually personally put mine in and had it personally inspected by a mechanic. And the ones that I had installed actually go off the odometer. So it doesn't really matter what the tire pressure is, but on the distance-wise. Just like I heard someone going from, what was it, one of the bars on North Cliff, I think it was the Red Eye, going out to Shenanigans. Well, the gentleman wound up getting charged $45. Well, I personally did that ride myself and found out that it should have been at least $15 less. It all just depends, how they took it and which way they went. Another matter is, I've also got personal phone calls from some of the local bars, like Shenanigans, 18th Amendment, asking me, why are there so many cab companies surrounding these bars during like Wednesdays, Thursdays? And honestly, I keep telling them, no, I don't know. You gotta talk to the owners why there's 8, 9 different cab companies just sitting around, parking a handicap, parking in front of other vehicles, and just numerous complaints about that. And I honestly cannot can't tell them the honest truth, because it's all up to the companies on how many are sitting out there. And one thing, excuse me, that brought an issue to my mind when I was reading on, say, Craigslist of back what happened in April with the incidents with a child. Some of the parents have actually come up to me and said that they would like to have drivers inspected for background checks and alcohol and drug use. Because I've actually used to work for a former company that used to be here. They actually used to hire convicted felons, people with drug uses in the past, some who have had their license suspended. And this actually brings up a concern for the parents. And I would like to know how City Council would actually like to address this matter.
Well, as part of, did you have a chance to take a look at the draft of this ordinance?
Yeah, I glanced through it.
Okay, on, let me take a look here real quick to get to that section. Section 124.062. Basically, we are already doing background checks on any new drivers and also owners when they first apply for a license. And I believe that it is investigated. Jim, could you speak to how this is going to be done? Is it yearly that we look at the drivers, or?
Right now, it's actually done by the police chief. We added language in there, his or her designee. It occurs at the beginning of the license. I'm not sure if that license expires or how that works. I think we might have somebody from the 1 year. So.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I do appreciate that they are doing inspections, but there's still too many complaints about people having records, whether they be Class A, Class B, felonies. That's just my concern from parents I've been hearing from.
Okay.
That's it.
Anything else then, or?
No, I think I think of.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Todd Slade, Quicksilver Taxi. I just want to clear up one little inaccuracy I've heard regarding taxi meters. Personally, I don't ever run the time, and I usually don't turn the meter on for like first mile. But sometimes timers are necessary if they want to shop and they want the cab to wait. Okay? If you turn the timer on, it does not double charge you. It does not click unless the car is traveling less than 5 miles an hour. So cabs in big cities, it's, they use it for gridlock. If they're going to be stuck in traffic for an hour, they got to get some pay coming in for lost rides. We don't need to worry about that, but I just want you to understand that the timer does not double charge people. The only time it would ever come on if somebody was using the timer is at a red light or a stop sign. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to the proposed changes? Counselor?
Can I ask you a couple questions? Just stuff
Sure.
you're thinking? Because you've been so active with this. I'm looking back again at this list of things that we're looking at for drivers. 124.062 doesn't include anything about drug testing or random rechecking. I wonder if that's something we want to consider. And then I also wonder about that idea. One owner asked, can we grandfather in existing drivers? And another says, yeah, but we know we have drivers that wouldn't qualify under these pretty strict rules. I hope this group is going to kind of work through how we deal with those sorts of issues, because, I understand that the school system does use taxis to move kids around during the day, and that's where this list becomes so dramatically important. So I'm just wondering about drug testing, random drug testing, and what do we do about those drivers?
There has been some discussion on that, and I think that discussion needs to continue with the companies, because at that point in time now we're starting to dictate what their internal rules would be. I think that in our discussion with the transit and our transit issues, maybe recreating a project taxi, I think that you know, if there was companies that were going to participate in that program, that we could dictate those type of rules at that point in time. As far as in this ordinance, I think that needs further discussion. And that's what I've heard from a few of the cab owners also. So I think that will be something that we can discuss in the future as we move forward with this.
Good. Cool.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone who attended, and the next public services meeting, we will be sending out invitations again. If you have any other comments or suggestions outside of the meeting, I am available. I will make myself available to your cab owners out there so that we can discuss these proposed changes and whatever other changes need to happen with this. The next meeting for the Public Services Committee will be October 8th after the informational meeting, so it'll be around 5 o'clock. If there is no other items on the agenda, I will adjourn this meeting.